it's important to talk about the season at large, talk about the off-season that awaits St. Louis and its fans, and the future of this organization, which begins today. It begins in this very moment in a lot of conversations at Busch Stadium, at Roger Dean Chevrolet Stadium, about how this team will move forward and get back to their former glory.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing some solutions. I don't have them. Otherwise, I would be making millions of dollars, Stefan. If you want to talk season retrospective, happy to. Disappointing game today, obviously. You end the season on a 4-game losing streak. You get swept by your rival, the Cubs. You have nothing going at the plate momentum-wise, 10 strikeouts. And pitching was all right. In terms of this season retrospective, it ended as it began. The offseason was directionless, aimless. Was it a youth movement? Was it a semi-competitive season? We don't know. Couldn't move guys with no trade clauses. Still to be determined if the Cardinals can move Sonny Gray, Nolan Arenado, and Wilson Contreras. Reports yesterday from the clubhouse are that Contreras is adamant he's going to stay, and Chaim Bloom is going to let him stay. And so the irony is not lost on me that the 3 Cardinals who last contributed to a meaningful postseason team in 2022, Nolan Arenado, Lars Nootbaar, and Brendan Donovan, are nowhere to be seen in the game today. Donovan because of injuries, Nootbaar with a below-average season at the plate, and Arenado likely headed to greener pastures. So this is a team that is in transition. We thought they were in transition in December. They still are. It's kind of a 2 steps forward, 2 steps back situation, Stefan. This offseason demands bold, decisive action in one way or another. We'll find out from Chaim Bloom on Tuesday what his vision is for this, I was going to say program, this organization. And he'll keep some things close to the vest. But in terms of what's next, that's what Cardinals fans want to know. What can we get on board with? What is the plan? What is this team going to look like in 2026? I'm seeing some comments now that maybe there will be some moving boxes, that maybe there will be a decisive action to bring in some talent from outside the organization. It sure seems that way. There are a lot of parts of this team's play all season long that left a lot to be desired. So the answer is we don't know where we were compared to where we were in December. And so I'll leave it at that. But just a disappointing day and a very milquetoast final week of the season.
Certainly a lot of financial decisions to be made for the Cardinals in the upcoming weeks and months for St. Louis and some of their star players, if you will. But some pretty easy financial decisions if you're listening to this show. The Card Central postgame show is brought to you by our business banking partners at Home Bank. From business lending to everyday banking, Home Bank has been with us since day one as a trusted partner. Business isn't just about numbers, it's about relationships. And with Home Bank, those relationships make all the difference. Home Bank is the team behind our team at STL Sports Central. Visit myhomebank.com or call 855-577-2001. Home Bank, member FDIC, more than a bank. They're your business partner. Now, Luke, 2-0, the Cardinals shutout today. We're not going to talk about it. The 4-game losing streak, not going to talk about it. Frustrating end to what was a very up and down season. And looking back on how the season began for St. Louis, just sort of taking a deeper look. Beginning of the year, this team could score with the best of them. Brant Brown had them well dialed. They had a tremendous month of May. They were within, I believe, at one point, 1 game of first place in the NL Central, and then it just wasn't sustainable. Over the course of 162, you will find out exactly who your team is. This is about, I think, where maybe even the most level-headed of Cardinals fans expected this team to end up. Certainly, we all had aspirations for a better record, but this is about right, given the talent on the field, given the injuries, and given certainly the lack of big free agent acquisitions in the offseason.
Yeah, lack of free agent acquisitions for sure. And Phil Maton, of course, headed for greener pastures at the trade deadline. So when you take away some of the guys that were holding the line, and I know that Cardinals fans had their gripes with Ryan Helsley, and this team is not the same team that it was in May. You take away that 1 month, this team was just towing the line of mediocrity. I had this conversation with Brendan Schaefer last week, is that mediocre kind of comes in different shapes and sizes. The San Francisco Giants got booted out by the Cardinals this past week, and they look completely different in that they've had a lot of injuries to their pitching staff, but they got a big bopper in the middle of the lineup. They had Devers, and Buster Posey is basically the equivalent to John Mozeliak over there, but they end up in pretty much the exact same place. For Cardinal fans, it was, what steps can the talent that we have on the field, what leaps can they take? And we saw Mason Wynn brush up his defensive game quite a bit and do well at the plate. Probably profiles more, just given his clutch hitting abilities, to hit maybe in a 5 or 6 spot. We saw Burleson take a step forward. He had a couple of bumps and bruises along the way. Brendan Donovan as well with injury trouble. And so we can belabor the rotation, all we want. One thing I will say about today's game, Stefan, that's probably worth addressing is Kyle Leahy. After 100 and what was it? 197 innings pitched. Let me pull up the exact number so I don't mess this up. Yeah, after 97 appearances in 135 innings, they see fit to give him a spot start here. Makeshift bullpen day for the Cardinals, and he goes 3 innings, 39 pitches, and he gets out of it, relatively unharmed. No swings and misses, which would be concerning, but again, like, no different than a long relief outing. Leahy had to shoulder a lot of burden this year in long relief. And so I like that it wasn't a huge aberration from what we saw from him just at the start of a game. So maybe you go into 2026 and you have this thought in the back of your mind that, hey, maybe we can see internally what talent we can have to patch up the back of the rotation. Kyle Leahy, maybe a back of the rotation number 5 guy that can be built up in Jupiter. So you can see the wheels turning, some machinations going on. But man, it's this team ended up where, like you said, a reasonable baseball fan would see them. There's not a lot of pop. There's not a lot of spice or pizzazz here.
I agree with your point. Again, back to what you were saying about Nolan Arenado not being in the lineup and Brendan Donovan not being in the lineup. Again, there have been a lot of conversations, at least within the fan base. What's the game plan? Is Brendan Donovan a Cardinal next year? Is Nolan Arenado a Cardinal next year? And I look at this as 2 possibilities, right? The more likely outcome is those guys are veterans. The season doesn't really matter at this point. You want to get a look at some of your young guys. I think that's why Kyle Leahy got the spot start, because they wanted to see how comfortable he would be in that position and potentially take this start into consideration going into the offseason. But there's also a part of me that questions, hey, last game of the year that means nothing. You have certainly been linked to the possibility that Brendan Donovan and Nolan Arenado could be offloaded. What is the benefit of putting them in the game and potentially risking injury in game 162? I don't see any benefit. Certainly, I love watching Brendan Donovan as much as the next person, but I think it's a really smart decision. And yet another smart decision that I think we have to touch on by Ollie Marmol. He deserves a ton of credit for braving through this year and being able to manage this team to the record that they had with the pieces that he had to play with. In many ways, he was going to war without a weapon, and he found a way to keep them competitive. I mean, they were down to the wire. Game 159 was when they were finally eliminated with that group. Really, really impressive stuff by the Cardinal skipper.